Well, thank you so much for being here today. So obviously we are going to be talking about something that's a very timely topic, which is AI. But I wanted to start, I've been covering Zocdoc for quite a while. I think a lot of people in this room have probably used it before, but in the time I've been covering it, you've changed a lot. So could you just start by reintroducing us to what Zocdoc does now?
Yeah, absolutely. So Zocdoc, for those of you who haven't tried it out, download the app. It's completely free. But we got started with the fundamental insight that it's very hard for a patient to actually get access to care. When we launched nearly 20 years ago, it took 26 days from the time a patient picked up the phone and started dialing for doctors till they actually saw one. And when we were doing our research, we heard time and time again, of course, there's a shortage of doctors, and whenever there's a shortage of anything, people need to queue up and take their turn. And our insight at the time was, no. Doctors actually, they have last-minute availability. There is reserve capacity because there are last-minute cancellations, no-shows, reschedules. And it's really a problem that a very expensive perishable resource, up to 30% of a doctor's time, goes to waste because the patient and the doctor can't meet up. And we decided to start Zocdoc as a clearinghouse to do that. Now we have a long history at this point. We still do this marketplace, this clearinghouse, but we have a much broader product offering for providers now where we help them distribute their availability to their own website, to places like Google or insurance directories or for the Veterans Administration. And we help them more recently also answer the phone with a technology solution. That's kind of ironic for us because we got started to get people off the phone, and now that was driven by the fact that when you call a doctor's office, you're on hold for a long time. People abandon it. They end up not getting care where they should, and there wasn't really a good solution for that until recently, where AI sort of opens the door to make this a much different, much better experience.
So let's talk about that new chatbot that you rolled out that uses AI.
Yeah, so we have a voice AI agent that does a number of things. It can pick up the phone and have a natural conversation with a patient to figure out what they need, why they're calling the office, like answer simple questions of like, where can I park, and do I need to fast, and what other things. But it can also take a scheduling conversation from beginning to end. It's completely autonomous in its way. It doesn't require human supervision. It will take care of 70% of the calls that are incoming, and the remaining calls are third shorter because the AI can already pre-credential the patient, can make sure it goes to the specific right human to take that call, and that human has a summary of why the patient is calling right in front of them when they pick up the phone.
Can you talk a little bit about what went into creating this tool? Because as you and I were talking about it, people at first, at least in certain parts of the country, might have found it a little bit rude.
Yeah, so it's funny. So I grew up in Germany, of course, so I might be rude by default. But also then, to further make things worse, I live in New York, and so we trained the initial version of Zoe, which is the name of our AI agent, in New York. And we made it so that New Yorkers really liked it. And then we started rolling it out, and one of our first markets was Georgia. It turns out that this New Yorker AI agent kept interrupting people that called in, and we realized, oh no, we have to invest more in cadence adjustment and end of utterance detection, and make sure that we give folks a chance to complete what they want to say, and that things like kindly, which was not in the vocabulary of our New York-based bot, means yes, right? And so I think there's a lot of things that you need to learn, and that's on the surface level. Obviously, I think that voice AI in general is going to be a commodity in the future, but then you have to infuse it with the domain expertise, right? And actually, I'd like to take a mini poll, if I may. Who in the room has already had interactions with a voice AI customer service agent? Show of hands. Oh, quite a few, actually. So I'm going to make a prediction. I might be wrong, but I don't think I will be. If we ask the same question next year, 100% of hands will be up, because that is really becoming a commodity. What is difficult is to infuse it with domain expertise, where you understand, okay, how do people talk about insurances? How do they talk about where their insurance card might be, right? How do they articulate what the visit reason is that they're coming in for, and adjusting that to the business logic that a doctor's office may have at the back end of this. So I think there's a really amazing journey of productivity ahead of us.
Yeah. I know as a healthcare reporter, when people ask me about AI, they say, okay, so when are the bots going to replace our doctors? And I think that says a lot about, what probably can't happen more than anything, because the answer is probably never, or at least not for a very long time, because there's a lot that we can't do necessarily. But where we're seeing a lot of innovation is where you've spoken about with the AI agents. Can you talk about sort of how it's been evolving?
Yeah, so from what we've seen doing our work, it is even in a very prescribed and sort of defined conversational space, like setting an appointment or what you talk to with a doctor's office, there's thousands and thousands of edge cases that you need to teach individually. And so, for a conversation with a doctor that has massively higher degrees of freedom, I think it's probably uneconomic to train an AI at the current state. I think it will remain uneconomic to do that, for some time to come. But maybe just to walk through the thought process that we had in focusing on Zo and this voice AI. So we started studying this a few years ago. I brought in a chief AI officer, and we were sort of mapping out what the likely evolution of AI is going to be. And we realized, okay, there's going to be this first wave of what I like to call assistive AI. It's like your eager intern, right? Like that works for you, but that requires supervision. And we saw a lot of this in sort of that first wave. I would call it like the 2024 AI wave, where we had the scribes. And what is typical of them is that they take parts of the work on, but they still require humans to make sure that they're not coming up with stuff. And what happens in these situations is that you need to do a lot of work on change management. People need to change their behavior. And then there's this constant tug of war, whether the productivity increase accrues to the entity that invested in this AI, or to the worker, right, that can finish their task sooner, but then maybe has more spare time. And we looked at that and said, well, that's going to be a tricky thing to do precisely right. And we just said we're going to leapfrog that assistive AI phase, and we go to autonomous AI. And we wanted to create a bot that can actually take a task from start to finish, right, without any human supervision, where we know we have constrained it in a way that there are not going to be any hallucinations. We can answer for what this AI does at any step of that conversation. And we give it the working memory and all the things that you would expect from a human interaction, so you don't have to repeat yourself or talk around what you say or say it in 3 different ways. But now you capture this productivity immediately, and it has a clear and defined ROI, and you also don't need to change anyone's actual job. Like either the AI finishes the job or the human does what the human did before, right? And so I think that's the state of affairs for 2025. As we look into the future, I think there's a really interesting phase of augmentative AI, where it's really superhuman, and obviously it will do things like speak all languages known to man, and maybe listen to me and detect that I'm an unfriendly German, and offer me the conversation in German to begin with. But maybe it can also do things like, based on the conversation, determine what my no-show likelihood is, right? Which is not easy for humans to do, but an AI can actually be trained on that. And then you can say, well, how do I help this patient to actually show up? Do I need to get transportation? Maybe I don't need to do this for everyone, but if your no-show chance is over a certain percentage, maybe I start doing that. Maybe I have a special reminder regime, and I have other sort of scaffolding available to the patient to make sure that they can actually take advantage of everything that modern medicine has to offer.
And I feel like with every iteration, it just keeps getting faster and faster. How far are we from a reality, from that being reality?
So I think this is already working in the lab. I think for a reputable company put their brand behind it. I think we're probably 12-month or 18-month away, but could be sooner. So this is not something where you should say, oh, I'm going to put this in my annual planning cycle for 2027. This is something where you can immediately get tremendous productivity increases, right? If you just think about the no-show rates among physicians, we constantly talk about physician shortage still. Even though Zocdoc exists and you can find any specialty you want and can see them within 24 hours, people still talk about, oh, there's not enough doctors around. Well, how about we just make sure that the doctors that are available and have time slots available, that these time slots are actually filled?
What about the regulatory hurdles that you face? What's ahead? What are you working on?
So we have always, obviously heavily regulated industry, and we have had multiple iterations of Zocdoc over the years. And I have to say, I grew up in Germany. I'm a U.S. citizen. I have all the fervor of the convert, for the U.S. It's really my goal to create market forces in healthcare and help us, organize us a lot more efficiently. And I personally have only good things to say about the process. I've gotten a lot of support on the Hill in various administrations. I think there's obviously always more to do. There's more to streamline. I think there are obviously many times valid concerns about what could happen, because not every player has sort of good intentions. I think so far everyone thinks that Zocdoc has good intentions, but obviously you need to be thoughtful when you design a large system with many players. I think there's a lot of no-nonsense and common sense regulation that could be updated. One of the things that we are working on is a regulation that's from 1972. That's when the fax machine was the hot technology of the day. Obviously that doesn't translate one-to-one to the internet, and then you can just even just a simple clarification of what these various words mean in today's world would be very helpful, for us to know what the solution space is in which we play.
And then as a company trying to integrate into so many pieces of the healthcare system with an AI product, how do you compete when other companies themselves are already creating their own internal AI products? Yeah,
see, I think this is one of the actually misguided approaches in US healthcare, is that everyone is trying to create their own walled garden. And when 20 years ago, when I started to think about what do I want to build, I thought about, hey, someone has to create the connective tissue, right? Because otherwise, the doctors on our platform, they use one of over nearly 150 different electronic health records. So if every electronic health record has their own scheduling solution, there is no bird's eye view across all doctors as to what's available for a patient. And so we have to pull this together, and our goal is to really put that infrastructure out there and make it available for everyone to access it. And we are making some good progress. We are starting to work with payers. We're working with the Veterans Administration, actually, who uses Zocdoc to book veterans into community care physicians as part of the Mission Act. And so what used to take weeks for one of these VA agents to find a doctor that can actually see the veteran and negotiate that appointment, they did 3-way phone calls to do that, can now be done in minutes. And that appointment is much closer to the time for the veteran, so that we don't have them wait for weeks and weeks and weeks to get care. And that's sort of how I imagine we can turn everything into a much smoother system. There's also enormous benefits for the providers to buy into this open system, because if you're a provider and you are an EHR X, then you're an EHR X. But if you set yourself up with Zocdoc, well, you can continue to stay on your EHR and have all the functionality of that EHR, but now suddenly it flows through to the VA. Suddenly it can flow through Google. It can flow to your own website. It can flow to Zocdoc.com. It can flow to other insurance companies and other ecosystem partners. So it's one touch point that gives you actually complete visibility over your surface to patients, and can make sure that you really have the most efficient and streamlined experience. And now with Zo, it is completely complete, because we also cover the phone.
We're coming up on time, but final question. We're here in DC crowd. What have your impressions been so far about working with the Trump administration with this transition to a new administration and how you message to them?
Yeah, so I mean, look, I'm dressed up like this with a tie, as we heard earlier, because I just spent the last 2 days in the White House and on the Hill. And look, Zocdoc has always been bipartisan. Everything we do is sort of common sense and has typically buy-in from both Republicans and Democrats. What we're seeing right now is an administration that obviously is trying to sort of get to grips. There's a lot of new people, other people have moved on, and so there's this reseeding of knowledge and a full understanding of the issues. But what's clear in my conversation, what I've heard multiple times from various people, I won't attribute it to anyone, but what I've heard is, hey, we want to differentiate ourselves from the prior administration by being willing to listen and take input from stakeholders and really make sure that people feel empowered to shape what the country is doing. And like, look, whatever you may think about the overall policy agendas, but having someone competing on, I want to be a good listener and a good partner, I don't see how this could be bad for anyone involved, and because you can sit in DC and you won't have necessarily the detailed firsthand knowledge of what's happening on the ground, and vice versa, and so that exchange I can only see as something promising.
Well, Dr. Kharraz, thank you so much for your time.
Good to be here. Thank you.